If you think about environmental products, you can think about things like trying to make a car that drives with less, well, I like the slogan, burns rubber, not oil, the Tesla, which was actually launched a year and a half ago. Nice performance, 0 to 60 in less than 4 seconds, 230-mile range, and so on. And they actually last week launched this saloon version, which is called the S, which is not yet out. It'll take a couple of years more to develop, but much less expensive. If we think of those are product solutions for a more large world of the design objects that we work with and live with. But I also think design needs to look at the planet in a much more holistic way. Think of sustainability in a bigger context. There's this wonderful guy called Shinichi Takamura, who was an anthropologist. He's worked in 50 countries, and he decided to become a media producer to tell people about the relationship between the planet and the things we're doing with it. And he's put together this hemisphere, which has got a computer projector in the center, so you can have real-time internet-based images projected onto it, very good scientific data about current and future trends. And then there's a row of sensors around the bottom of the hemisphere, so when you touch it, you can actually spin the globe, so it becomes an interactive device. Really rather wonderful, but it helps us to think about the whole planet in terms of the things we design for it, and with it and on it. So now, the award. There was only one entry in the industrial design category this time that was on the shortlist, so I think I know who's going to get the gold, but it's the Apple MacBook Air. Wonderfully slim. You can fit it in an envelope, and that's achieved with new batteries and new technologies. Thank you.
Does anyone have a MacBook Air? They're so thin, it's incredible. They're wonderful to travel with. Thank you, Bill. I would now like to shift gears a bit and focus on one of our Edison Achievement Award winners for this year. I'm honored to have this opportunity to introduce Mr. Tom Kelly, who will in turn introduce his brother, David Kelly, winner of this afternoon's first 2009 Edison Achievement Award for Innovation Excellence. Tom is IDEO's general manager. Years ago, with his brother David, Tom helped manage the firm as it grew from 20 designers to a staff of more than 500. During that time, Tom has been responsible for such diverse areas as business development, marketing, human resources, and operations. Tom has shared IDEO's philosophy on innovation through his 2 best-selling books, The Art of Innovation, published in 2001, and The 10 Faces of Innovation, published in 2005, which is one of my favorites. When not traveling the world speaking about innovation, Tom can be found biking to IDEO's California offices or watching more than 100 movies per year. Edison would surely love to hear that. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Tom Kelly.
Okay, well, the bad news about this next segment is that Jim Hackett, Steelcase CEO and general all-around great guy, who had prepared this really nice intro for my brother David, got called away at the last minute and is not here today to do this intro. But the good news is, having shared the same bedroom with my brother for the first 14 years and worked with him for the last 22 years, I have plenty of material, even on short notice, right? So the first thing I'll tell you about David is that if David himself talks to you about his early life, as he does with his friends at a few of the tables here, he means everything he says. But don't always take it at face value. Because, for example, those of you who have talked to David will know he describes his high school years as that he was some sort of super nerd or something. He was some sort of social outcast if you take what he said at face value. But if you probe a little deeper, you'll notice that he was also president of the student council and a guitarist in the most popular rock band in town, right? So it doesn't all exactly match up. And he also says if you just talk about his college years at Carnegie Mellon, he'll tell you that he almost flunked out of the double E program, an electrical engineering program, which I think, strictly speaking, might be true, but then, inexplicably, his academic record was good enough to get him hired as an engineer at Boeing, where they know something about engineers, right? And then accepted into a master's program at Stanford. So, you know, go figure, right? But I'm guessing that the Edison Awards steering team picked David for this prestigious award more for the successes he's had, the accomplishments he's had in the last 30 years than for those successful failures, or whatever you want to call them, at places like Carnegie Mellon and Boeing. Because my brother David, as some of you know, in 1978, he founded IDEO, design and engineering firm, and helped it grow from what back then was 2 guys in a dingy office over a dress shop downtown Palo Alto, and helped it grow to over 500 people today, spread across 3 continents. And in those same years that he was building IDEO, you know, on the side, in his, quote, spare time, he was working and teaching at Stanford. And, you know, technically, the people at Stanford, I think, still believe that they were his full-time employers at the time, and that IDEO was the sidelight. But some of us see it slightly differently. And, you know, imagine David, as, you know, I was kind of right beside him at the time. Imagine David there at Stanford with no PhD and no published papers. You'd have to say that his prospects in the professor track, the traditional professor's track at a world-class school like Stanford, you'd have to say his prospects were dicey at best, right? But even as a small child, as I can testify, David always colored outside the lines, right? And so at Stanford, again, he found his own unique path, and somehow just ignoring the 2 pretty key prerequisites, the PhD and the published papers, he still managed to progress and got tenure, he got full professorship, he got an endowed chair, and along the way got membership in the National Academy of Engineering. So of course, David's doing this interesting stuff at Stanford and at IDEO, but, you know, if you're his brother, it's still easy to make light of it, right? Because, you know, I was still wearing his hand-me-down clothes for the first 30 years of my life, right? And so he didn't seem that special to me, I gotta say. But what really got my attention, as somebody who was just kind of hanging around with him, what got my attention was those lists. You know, about 20 years ago, David started showing up on all these cool lists. And just to you know, give you an example, the kind of lists I mean, I went through my personal archives late last night when I found out I was going to be doing this intro and fished out a few. And so the first of the list was this one. He was in the San Jose Mercury, and they had this list of the 100 most powerful people in Silicon Valley. And you know, I thought, okay, that's kind of random, right? But, you know, I didn't pay much attention to that. But then, right after that, then Fortune magazine came up with this thing called People to Watch. But if you're the brother, this is pretty easy to brush off, too, because People to Watch, right? They're not taking a stand exactly. They're not saying David Kelly, wonderful guy, saving the planet. They're saying people to watch, right? That's kind of like saying David Kelly, definitely, maybe, right? But then, shortly after that, then the list makers kicked into high gear, and wow, the list got too numerous to mention, and so I promise I won't mention all of them, but just to give you the flavor of them, I wanted to show you a few. So there's this list. This was the list of America's leading design innovators, and very apropos to today's award, they talked about David Kelly as, quote, the most sought-after design engineer this side of Thomas Edison. And so at that point, it started to get my attention. And then the list just go on and on. The New York Times Magazine put him on this list of what they called wizards, wonders, and wonks. And then Time Magazine writes 6 pages about him and titles the article, Move Over Da Vinci. Now, that's slightly aspirational in my mind, right? But when the list makers really get carried away, when it just goes over the top, they're in hyperdrive now. In fact, let's be honest, I think here at this point we could say there's just a smidge of hyperbole thrown in, right? Because David appears in this cover story. That's not him on the cover, but